Welcome back to Views with Hughes, Gender-Free News. This is Jerome Hughes. Now, let's go ahead and get right into it. So, if you've been following Rings of Power Season 2, you probably already knew it was a matter of time before the viewership data started reflecting what many of us, myself included, have been saying for a long time, that this is not the Lord of the Rings, okay, as we know it. And this is not Tolkien, and people are finding out and tuning out. Now, new data from Nielsen shows that, basically it's in decline in viewership, and significant and quite frankly telling of the larger problem with Rings of Power Season 2. Now, Nielsen reported back in 2022 that the 2-episode premiere of Rings of Power Season 2 brought in an impressive 1.253 billion minutes watched, and that sounds like a big number, right? Well, if fast forward to today, and we see that the 3-episode premiere of Rings of Power Season 2 only managed to pull in 1.15 billion minutes, okay? But on the surface, that's already an 18.9% decline for Rings of Power Season 2 so far. But the real story is, when you dig a little deeper, the first season's premiere of Rings of Power is different from Rings of Power Season 2, and they had a total runtime of 132 minutes. Rings of Power Season 2, that premiere clocked in only at 204 minutes across 3 episodes in more day spread. So if you factor in the actual length of the episodes and everything, the drop in Rings of Power Season 2 viewership is far more dramatic. Now, you're looking at a 47% decline in actual viewership when you actually calculate the minutes watched per runtime for Rings of Power Season 2. Man, 47%, nearly half of the audience that tuned in for Rings of Power Season 2 simply Season 1 didn't come back for Rings of Power Season 2. Now, that's not just a dip, that's a collapse for Rings of Power Season 2. Now, if you compare it to what we've been seeing from other data points about, Rings of Power Season 2, well, guess what? This figure lines up perfectly. You see, Samba TV, another analytics firm, reported that 1.8 million U.S. households watched Season 1 premiere of Rings of Power, and compared to Season 2 within 4 days of its release. But for Rings of Power Season 2, that number simply just plummeted, as I reported before, to just 902,000 households over 5 days. Again, that's a 49.8% decline in viewership for Rings of Power Season 2. And its second season, that's half the audience gone from the Rings of Power, Season 1. Now, this is a deliberate decision by viewers to not return to Rings of Power Season 2 because simply is not delivering on its promises. And really, is that any surprise when it comes to Rings of Power Season 2 or Rings of Power in general? Now, back in 2023, Kim Masters at The Hollywood Reporter revealed that only 37% of people who started watching Rings of Power Season 2 actually finished the show here in the United States. That means only 63% of viewers checked out long before Rings of Power Season 2 was over, or Season 1 was over, excuse me. But overseas, the numbers were a little better, but not by much. You see, just 45% of the international viewers completed Rings of Power Season 2. A 50% completion rate is considered a decent result, but Rings of Power didn't even manage that. So let's be real here about Rings of Power Season 2. You see, Rings of Power Season 2 is basically hemorrhaging viewers at an alarming rate. Now, the latest Nielsen data only reinforces what many of us suspected of Rings of Power Season 2. That's not resonating with fans. And it's not just a comparison between, the 2 seasons of Rings of Power either. See, this drop off that's affecting Rings of Power Season 2 is happening episode by episode in Rings of Power Season 2, and data from Illuminate shows that, the viewership for Rings of Power Season 2 premiere garnered simply 63.2 million minutes watched, although it's worth noting that, this was only for a single day due to the show's release timing, where they released 2 episodes. In the second week, the viewership of Rings of Power Season 2 jumped to 764.7 million minutes, but by week 3, Rings of Power Season 2 was back down to 372.7 million minutes. That's a 51% drop in just 1 week. And for Rings of Power Season 2, that's sad. And it doesn't stop there. By the 4th week, Rings of Power Season 2 only managed 346.4 million minutes watched, another 7% decline from week 3. of Rings of Power Season 2. Now, this downward trajectory for Rings of Power Season 2 shows no signs of stopping, okay? In fact, it seems almost certain that the viewership for Rings of Power Season 2 will only continue to plummet as people realize that Rings of Power Season 2 has very little to do with the essence of Tolkien's works. Okay, and that shouldn't be no surprise. Now, why exactly is this happening to Rings of Power Season 2? Why are people just abandoning Rings of Power Season 2 in droves? Well, it's not hard to figure that out. You see, the showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay seem to have a real big problem respecting the source material of Rings of Power Season 2, or simply put, they shouldn't have just made this in the first place. Thanks to Jeff Bezos. But if you're a fan of Tolkien, you know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to Rings of Power Season 2. Now, the most recent episode of Rings of Power Season 2 saw Galadriel, or as you call it, Galadriel, one of the most iconic characters in, Middle Earth, romantically kiss Elrond. And for y'all who aren't even familiar with Tolkien's lore, I'm gonna share something with you. Y'all know me as a Tolkien fan and everything. You see, Elrond is Galadriel's son-in-law. He marries her daughter Celebrian. This is direct contradiction to Tolkien's works, and it shows a blatant disregard for the mythology and the world building that so many of us love about about Lord of the Rings. And the problem is they're doing a lot of shipping to the point where it's affecting the ratings. Now, this is just one example of the kind of malice that the showrunners of Rings of Power Season 2 seem to have toward Tolkien's original vision when it comes to Rings of Power Season 2. Now, when they are fundamentally changing characters here and, relationships in Rings of Power Season 2 in a way that not only alienates fans, but actively undermines the lore that has made Lord of the Rings one of the most beloved series of all time, stories of all time, And people are seeing right through it, and they're tuning out because of what they're watching on Rings of Power Season 2, which is not Tolkien's Middle Earth. It's just a hollow imitation of what could have been what could have been in Lord of the Rings by using what they have in Rings of Power Season 2. So what do we make of this Nielsen data about Rings of Power Season 2? Well, it's clear that the Rings of Power Season 2 is definitely failing to hold on to its audience. Despite Amazon's massive investment in Rings of Power in general, especially with Rings of Power Season 2, despite the hype, despite the flashy visuals and the marketing, viewers are simply voting with their remotes and their wallets, and they're voting no to Rings of Power Season 2. Now, they're saying that this isn't the Lord of the Rings that they wanted, and they're tuning away in droves from Rings of Power Season 2. Now, that shouldn't come as a surprise for many of us, but the numbers don't lie when it comes to Rings of Power Season 2. Now, whether it's Nielsen or Samba TV or Illuminate, the message is the same. Rings of Power Season 2 is losing viewers fast, and there's little to suggest that Rings of Power Season 2 will ever recover. In fact, I guarantee you all that as more episodes of Rings of Power Season 2 drop, we'll just simply see an even steeper decline as word spreads that Rings of Power Season 2 is far removed from the spirit of Tolkien's work. Now, for Jeff Bezos and Amazon, you know what? Basically, this should definitely be a wake-up call when it comes to Rings of Power Season 2. Now, fans of the Lord of the Rings and stuff are passionate, and they care deeply about the legacy of this beloved franchise, but they also know that when they're being sold a superb product with Rings of Power Season 2, they're going to fall away. You can't slap the name of the Lord of the Rings on Rings of Power Season 2, fill it with superficial nods to the source material, and expect people to accept it. That's not how any of this works at all, especially for Rings of Power Season 2. So yeah, where does Rings of Power Season 2 go from here? Honestly, it's hard to say for Rings of Power Season 2. With each passing week, it becomes clearer that Rings of Power Season 2 is basically a misfire on a fundamental level, okay? Now, if the showrunners of Rings of Power Season 2 don't course correct, and I mean drastically, it's going to be tough to see how they can salvage Rings of Power Season 2. Now, the damage may have already been done for Rings of Power Season 2, and there's no recovery. But either way, the numbers are a stock for Rings of Power Season 2, and they paint a clear picture. See, Rings of Power Season 2 is losing viewers and at an alarming rate, and unless something changes for Rings of Power Season 2, it's likely that this trend is going to be continuing. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts may have this particular topic. If you enjoyed what I shared in this video, go ahead and smash the like button, share far wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already and you enjoyed all the content that I put out there, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, click the bell notification so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Till then, peace.